I genuinely believed I would never be caught. Not in an arrogant way, not the way someone believes they're smarter than everyone around them. In a quieter, more dangerous way. The way someone believes it when they have been careful, when they have covered every visible track, when they have maintained the surface of their life so well that even they sometimes forget what is running underneath it. For 7 months, I lived 2 lives with a precision that frightened me and impressed me in equal measure. And I sat across from the man who loved me every single evening, looked him in the eyes, and felt nothing. No shake in my voice, no visible guilt, just the smooth, practiced face of someone who had become very good at something very wrong. Before you judge me, tell me where you're watching from, because I think the version of this story that most people tell themselves is that they would have stopped earlier, that some internal alarm would have sounded and they would have listened to it. I thought that about myself too, once. I was wrong. Stay with me, drop a comment, and tell me where you are, because what I learned about myself through all of this is something I would not have been able to hear secondhand. I had to live through it to understand it. And I am still understanding it. His name was Liam. We had been together for 3 years, living together for 1, and by every external measure we were a couple that worked. People said it at dinners and at gatherings the way people say things they mean, that we seemed right together, that we balanced each other, that there was something easy and genuine about us that was nice to be around. And it wasn't wrong, what they saw. Liam and I did work in most of the ways that matter. He was thoughtful and present, and he loved me with a particular attentiveness that made me feel, for a long time, like the most considered person in his life. He was a reader. He would mark passages in books he thought I would like and leave them open on the kitchen counter for me to find. He remembered the names of people I mentioned once in passing, colleagues, distant friends, someone I'd talked about briefly, and asked about them weeks later with genuine interest. He listened when I talked in a way that showed he had been listening the last time too. That quality, that specific, sustained paying attention, was something I did not recognize as exceptional until I had lost the right to be on the receiving end of it. What I want to tell you about is the thing that existed in me long before anything went wrong, because I think it is the most important and least comfortable part of this whole story. I had a self-worth problem that I had never properly addressed, not in the obvious, identifiable way that sends people to therapy, in the buried, functional way, the kind that lets you get through every day, maintain relationships, perform confidence, and still carry somewhere deep inside a gnawing, persistent uncertainty about whether you are genuinely enough. Whether you are genuinely lovable in the full, permanent way, or whether the love people offer you is contingent on the version of yourself you are careful to show them. Liam loved me completely and I could not fully receive it. Not because it wasn't real, it was entirely real, but because some part of me was always waiting for the condition, the withdrawal, the moment when his understanding of who I was would update and the love would adjust accordingly. I could not settle into being loved, and people who cannot settle into being loved have a tendency to test it, to push against it, to seek the high of being chosen by someone new, someone who doesn't know yet all the reasons they might eventually choose otherwise. I know all of that now. I am giving it to you clearly and cleanly because years of therapy and self-examination have made it available to me in that form. At the time, I did not have access to any of it. At the time, it simply felt like restlessness, like the specific itch of wanting something I could not name. His name was Owen. He came into my professional life through a collaborative project. I worked in marketing, and he was a consultant brought in on a campaign that ran across 3 months. He was charming in the way that people who have always been charming are charming, easily, unconsciously, without apparent effort. He was interested in me from early on, and I felt that interest the way you feel sun after a long winter, with your whole body and without much judgment. I told myself for the first 4 weeks of working alongside him that I was simply enjoying professional rapport with an engaging colleague. I told myself this with sincerity because I needed to believe it. And then one evening, when the team had gone for drinks after a late session, Owen and I ended up in a corner of the bar talking for 2 hours about things that had nothing to do with the campaign, and I drove home knowing something I had been pretending not to know, and I went to sleep next to Liam without telling him any of it. That night, the decision not to mention it, the choice to fold it inward and keep it private, was the beginning. Not the bar, not the conversation, not Owen. The silence was the beginning. The small, apparently inconsequential choice to have something that was only mine. The text started the following week. I want to be precise about the escalation because I think the precision matters. It was not sudden. It was a series of small increments, each one barely distinguishable from the one before it, each one feeling manageable and reversible in isolation. A work text that ran slightly personal. A reply that asked a question beyond the scope of the project. An exchange that continued after midnight when it had no professional reason to. Each step was small. Each step was also deliberate, even when I told myself it wasn't. I moved the conversation to a separate app after 2 weeks. I want you to sit with that detail because it is the one that strips away every defense I could otherwise construct. Moving a conversation to a hidden app is not an accident. It is not a gray area. It is a person who knows exactly what they are doing it anyway, and taking steps to ensure it remains invisible. I knew. I was not confused or swept away or operating without awareness. I was making choices with full consciousness and covering the evidence as I went. Liam noticed something in week 3. Not specifically. He didn't have anything concrete, nothing he could point to. But he had the instinct of someone who loves a person well enough to feel the texture of their presence shift. "You seem somewhere else lately," he said one morning over breakfast. Casual, but watching my face carefully. "Work is intense right now," I said. "This project is taking more out of me than I expected." He nodded slowly. "Is that all it is?" I looked at him directly. "Yes," I said. "Why, what are you thinking?" "I'm not thinking anything specific. You feel slightly far away." I wanted to name it. "I appreciate that," I said, and I meant it. The cruelest part of that exchange is that I genuinely appreciated it. The attentiveness, the care, the willingness to name a thing rather than let it accumulate in silence. I appreciated it, and I used it to construct a more convincing version of myself for the rest of that morning. Performed presence because he had asked for presence. It is perhaps the most cynical thing I did in the whole of this period, and I did it without recognizing it as cynical. The physical line was crossed in the 6th week of the project. I had known it was coming, not scheduled, not planned, but known in the way you know something that has been building without resolution. It happened after a late evening of work, the way these things tend to happen, in the specific vacuum of tiredness and proximity and the lowered vigilance of a night that had gone on too long. I will not dress it up or provide a narrative that softens it. A line was crossed that I had been approaching for weeks, and I crossed it, and I drove home afterward through empty streets feeling something I had not expected. I had expected relief, or guilt, or some clean, identifiable emotion that would tell me what to do next. What I felt instead was a strange, suspended blankness, like a room after a door has been shut, like the absence of sound after something loud. I felt the weight of what I had done without being able to access the appropriate emotional response to it, which, I now understand, is what happens when you have been compartmentalizing for so long that the compartments stop communicating. Over the following 7 weeks, I maintained 2 simultaneous realities with a thoroughness that required constant management. I memorized my own lies the way you memorize lines for a performance, checking the internal consistency, tracking which detail had been said to whom, ensuring that no version of events I had offered to Liam could be contradicted by anything he might encounter. I became, without intending to become this, a skilled and methodical deceiver. And the skill of it is something I find harder to sit with than almost anything else about this period. Not the deception itself, the ease of it. The way it came without the difficulty I would have predicted. Liam brought me flowers on a random Tuesday in October. No occasion, no reason he offered beyond. "I just thought you might like them." He set them on the kitchen counter and went to make dinner, and I stood looking at those flowers and felt something crack open in my chest. Not enough to stop, but enough to feel. And feeling it and continuing anyway is the thing I carry most heavily. There was a Friday night in November where everything came close to collapsing. Owen had called me, not texted, called, and I had stepped outside to take it, and Liam had seen me through the window, standing in the cold, ahing at something on the phone, When I came back and he said, "Who was that?" "Someone from the project team," I said, "just catching up about the final deliverables." He was quiet for a moment. "You were laughing." "We were talking about something funny that happened at the last meeting." He looked at me for a long time, not accusingly, just carefully, the way someone looks at something they're trying to read. "Okay," he said eventually, and went back to what he was doing. That night I lay awake for a long time. The near miss had a clarifying quality, the particular cold clarity of almost losing something and realizing, in that instant of almost, how much you had actually been risking. I came close to waking him, close to saying, "There is something I need to tell you, and I need to tell you now before I lose the ability to choose honesty over management." I lay in the dark rehearsing the sentence. I did not say it. I told myself morning would be better. Morning came, and the moment had closed, and I let the management continue. The discovery did not come through a phone or a conversation or any of the mechanisms I had spent 7 months guarding against. It came through Owen himself. The project had ended by then, the professional context dissolved, and I had been attempting to let the whole thing exhaust itself by attrition, reducing contact, allowing the frequency of communication to decrease, hoping that with enough time it would simply fade into the category of something that had happened and been contained. Owen had other ideas about how it should end. He sent a message, not to me, to Liam, through a social media platform, a message that was brief and specific and left no room for alternative interpretation. I found out because Liam showed me the message before he said a single word. He sat down across from me at the kitchen table, placed his phone between us with the screen facing me, and waited. I read it. I felt the floor shift. He waited a moment longer, and then he said very quietly, "How long?" I told him. The full timeline, in the order it had happened, without the managing or the framing I had been using internally for months. I owed him at minimum the plain truth, and I gave it. He did not raise his voice. He did not throw anything. He sat across the table from me and absorbed it in the specific stillness of someone who had been suspecting something and is now having the suspicion confirmed and expanded simultaneously, and who is holding themselves together through sheer force of a dignity that he had always possessed, and that I had not, it turned out, valued carefully enough. When I finished, he said, "I want to ask you something and I need a real answer." "Okay," I said. "Did I do something? Was there something I failed to give you that drove this? Because I need to know if this is something I contributed to or if this is entirely..." He stopped, took a breath. "I need to know." I looked at him, at his face, which I had looked at for 3 years, which I had looked at across breakfast and across arguments and across quiet evenings that had been, genuinely, some of the best evenings of my life. And I said, "No, you did nothing wrong. This has nothing to do with anything you did or didn't do. This is entirely mine." He nodded once, stood up. "Then I think you need to leave tonight." The secondary thing I had not anticipated came 2 weeks later. A mutual friend, someone I had been close to, someone I had trusted, came to me and told me that Owen had sent similar messages to other people from his past. That this was a pattern he had, specifically, of ending things in ways that detonated consequences for the other person. That I was not the first. That the message to Liam had not been an act of conscience or honesty, but an act of control, the last move of someone who wanted to ensure that the ending had weight. I sat with that for a long time. I want to be careful here, because nothing about that information changed my own accountability. I had made my choices. His motivations for the ending did not retroactively alter what I had done with my choices, but it did change how I understood what I had been part of. The thing I had built a mythology around in my private imagination, the significance of it, the specialness of the connection, the sense that it was something particular, had been, from his side, something considerably more ordinary. Something with precedent, something he had done before and managed the ending of deliberately. I had risked a real relationship, a real love, for something that had been, for him, largely routine. The months that followed were the most disassembling of my life. I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment and spent the first 3 weeks in it mostly unable to explain to myself how I had arrived there. Not grief in the melodramatic sense, in the real sense. The everyday grief of a reduced life. The absence of ordinary things. A second coffee cup in the mornings. A voice asking how your day was, the specific ease of being known. I had not understood, while I had it, how much of my daily experience was textured by Liam's presence. I understood it fully in his absence. He did not reach out. I did not reach out to him. I had lost the right to ask for his time or his forgiveness, and I knew it, and I honored that knowledge by staying away. What I know of him now comes through the occasional peripheral information of shared history, enough to know he is doing well, which is a relief that I hold alongside the guilt cleanly and without trying to resolve the combination. I started therapy 6 weeks after moving out, not because I was coping badly, because I was coping in ways that felt too managed, too surface level, and I had learned something important about managed surfaces by then. My therapist asked me, in the 3rd session, to describe the version of myself that had made those choices, not to defend her or condemn her, to describe her. To understand what she had been carrying, what she had been avoiding, what she had been seeking that she had been unable to ask for directly. That work, the work of understanding rather than simply regretting, has been the most important thing I have done in the years since, because regret without understanding produces nothing useful. It just produces pain that sits in place without moving. Understanding gives the pain somewhere to go. I am 29 now. I am single, not unhappily so single in the way of someone who has spent time learning what it means to be present with themselves before asking someone else to be present with them. I am still learning the specific skill of receiving love without waiting for it to be withdrawn. Still learning what it means to turn toward a problem in a relationship rather than away from it and toward something easier. What I know clearly is this. I thought I could manage the unmanageable. I thought precision and carefulness and the practiced surface of an ordinary life could contain something that was, by its nature, designed to expand and eventually overflow. I was wrong. Not because someone caught me, though someone did, but because the management itself was eroding me, quietly and steadily, in ways I would not have been able to sustain indefinitely regardless of whether I was ever discovered. The man who loved me, who left flowers on a Tuesday for no reason, who asked the names of people I mentioned once, who noticed when I was far away and named it gently and without accusation, that man deserved the honest conversation. Every time I felt restless. Every time something felt insufficient. Every time the unnamed itch arrived. He deserved to be told, clearly and directly, what was happening in me, and he deserved the chance to respond to it. I did not give him that. I gave him a managed surface and a performance of presence and 7 months of careful, deliberate deception, and I called it, in my internal narrative, something more complicated than it was. It was not complicated. It was a choice, made repeatedly, to prioritize my own comfort over his right to the truth. If you have someone who loves you the way Liam loved me, imperfectly, humanly, but genuinely and with attention and care, and something is wrong, something is missing, something in you is reaching toward a door you haven't opened yet, I am asking you to turn around. To face the person behind you. To have the conversation that feels too hard and too exposing and too uncertain in its outcome. Because the alternative, the version I chose, is not a solution. It is a postponement with compounding interest. And when it comes due for everyone. I thought I would get away with it. For 7 months I was right. And then I was wrong, completely and permanently, in ways that reshaped everything I thought I knew about who I was. Leave a comment below. Tell me what stayed with you, and I will see you in the next one.